all. So today I will be presenting this article that's based on a study conducted to test the effectiveness of mRNA booster vaccines among healthcare workers in New York City during the Omicron surge. So by now we all know about the SARS-CoV-2 virus, or better known as COVID, and its identified variants. So Omicron is one of the variants of concern and is the current circulated variant of concern, according to the World Health Organization. Omicron was first identified in November of 2021 in South Africa. The first case in the US was found in December of 2021. So down there is just an image showing the other four variants of the COVID virus. So a little bit of background on this study. Before Omicron was identified, the COVID vaccines by Pfizer and Moderna were seen as clinically effective to combat the Alpha and Delta variants. But due to the higher transmissibility of the Omicron variant, the effectiveness of the vaccines had to be reevaluated. To reevaluate the effectiveness of the vaccines, a study was conducted with healthcare workers. This study compared COVID infection rates among New York City healthcare workers that had 2-dose vaccinations and 3-dose vaccinations. This study was conducted from December of 2021 through January of 2022. The objective of this study was to find how effective mRNA vaccines are against the Omicron variant. So there were a few things established in the study for the healthcare workers testing policy. So the healthcare workers were tested weekly, and all the positive results were reported through a survey. The details of the infections were also recorded. So this would mean if the individuals presented with any symptoms or if they were asymptomatic. And all those details were recorded through a questionnaire filled out by the individuals themselves. So the individuals were tested weekly with PCR tests. The PCR tests utilized either nasal swabs or saliva samples from the individuals. Their samples were tested with either TAC-PATH COVID-19 combo kits or Combus SARS-CoV-2 tests to detect any viral RNA of the virus. So this study used two factors to evaluate the effectiveness of the mRNA vaccines on the Omicron variant. So the first variable was the dosage of the mRNA vaccines received by the healthcare workers. So there were two dosages in mind. So the first group would be those with 2 doses of the vaccine, and the other group would be those with 3 doses of the mRNA vaccine. The second variable of this study was the presence of any prior COVID-19 infections prior to this study and the time frame. So this variable broke the population of the study down further into 4 groups. So these groups were the individuals with 3-dose vaccinations without any prior infection, 3-dose individuals with a prior infection, 2-dose individuals without any prior infection, and the last would be individuals with 2-dose vaccinations with prior infection. The effectiveness of the vaccine was measured with calculated rate ratios between the groups. So to evaluate the impact of the 3 mRNA doses to protect against the Omicron variant, the weekly positivity rates of both 2-dose and 3-dose healthcare workers were calculated. So moving on to the results. So this first graph keeps in mind only the first variable of the study. So it shows the weekly rate ratios for infections in 3-dose healthcare workers versus 2-dose vaccinated healthcare workers. So as you can see, up here shows that the red represents those with 2 doses and the purple represents those with 3 doses. So just by looking at the graph, we can see that those with 2 doses, the group with 2-dose vaccinations had higher weekly positivity rates every week. Down here, we can see that the amount of individuals that were positive each week. And looking at the numbers, we can see that the number of positives for 2-dose vaccinated recipients were greater than those with 3 doses of the vaccine. So the red is the 2 doses, the purple is the 3-dosed. So this second figure introduces the second variable, which is the presence of any prior infections prior to the Omicron variant in the time frame of this study. So it shows the rate ratios comparing infection rates. So this graph shows the 4 groups with the variable of any prior infections. So as you can see, those individuals with 2 doses of the vaccine and no prior infection had higher weekly infection rates for almost every week. You can also see that there were low positivity rates for the healthcare workers that had 3 doses versus the ones with 2 doses. So now to interpret the results. So the first finding of this study was that there were more infections in 2-dose vaccinated healthcare workers than those with 3 doses of the vaccinations. So the overall number of vaccinated recipients that were infected with the virus was 3,203 vaccinated individuals. Of those 3,203 vaccinated individuals, 1,315 were 3-dose healthcare workers, and 1,888 of those individuals were vaccinated with 2 doses. The infection rate ratio of 3 doses versus 2 doses was 0.667. The comparative vaccine effectiveness of 3-dosed versus 2-dosed for lab-confirmed COVID infections for the Omicron dominant period was 33.3%. The infection rate, so the next finding that was for this study was that there were more asymptomatic infections for the 3-dose vaccinated recipients than those with 2 doses. So as you can see here, 16% of the 3-dose healthcare workers were asymptomatic, and 11% of the 2-dose healthcare workers were asymptomatic. So this would show that the higher the dosage, the more it was probable for the individuals to be asymptomatic. And the third finding of this study was that the vaccinated recipients with COVID infections prior to the start of the study had better protection against the Omicron variant, specifically those who had 3 doses of the vaccination. So this evidence suggested better clinical protection against Omicron in 3-dose vaccinated individuals with prior infection. So the study from the established cohort of over 20,000 New York City healthcare workers showed a benefit of 3-dose vaccinations versus two doses of the vaccination against infection caused by the Omicron variant. So according to these results, we can see that prior COVID-19 infection did impact the effectiveness of the mRNA vaccines against the Omicron variant. This study demonstrates improved vaccine-derived protection against COVID-19 infection in 3-dosed individuals versus 2-dosed individuals during the Omicron surge. So this would mean that the advantage of the 3-dose vaccinations was maintained irrespective of prior COVID-19 infection status. So the study confirmed that healthcare workers vaccinated with 3 doses of the mRNA vaccine had better protection against Omicron infection than those immunized with only 2 doses. The vaccination enhances clinical protection in those with prior COVID-19 infections. From this study, we can learn that the effectiveness of the COVID-19 vaccines can increase with a higher dosage. To protect against emerging variants of SARS-CoV-2 or COVID, booster mandate programs more broadly should optimize protection against emerging variants. And then this slide is just showing all my citations. Thank you.